Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the Library Makerspaces Research Showcase, a one-day event dedicated to highlighting the latest research and scholarship on library makerspaces. I'm Dr. Kyungwon Koh, Associate Professor and Director of the Champaign-Urbana Community Fab Lab in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. We are thrilled to see participants from across the country, internationally, and from a wide range of institutions. This showcase is part of the National Forum to Connect and Advance Library Makerspaces project, which is funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is a collaborative effort among the Champaign-Urbana Community Fab Lab, School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and University of Illinois Chicago College of Education, the American Library Association's core division Maker Technology Interest Group, the Nation of Makers Libraries Working Group, and Library Makers. So the National Forum has three primary goals. One, facilitates systematic coordination and collaboration among various maker groups and leaders. Second, reflect on, synthesize, and leverage the accumulated knowledge and expertise in library makerspaces. And lastly, chart the future direction of library makerspaces and identify the necessary resources and opportunities. And this research showcase specifically addresses the second goal. So over the past decades and beyond, the growth of library makerspaces has been remarkable. So during this period, a number of individuals, teams, and organizations have received federal, state, local, and private funding to conduct research. They publish in highly regarded venues and implement evidence-based best practices for library makerspaces. Each project has contributed significantly to both theoretical understanding and practical development of this field. Now is a critical time to reflect on the achievement and advancements within the maker movement in libraries. So today we come together to celebrate these achievements, connect and learn from one another, and collectively synthesize the knowledge accumulated so far. So this reflection is essential for understanding the impact of past efforts and shaping the future of library makerspaces. Now, let me introduce our team. Again, this is Dr. Kyungwon Koh, and I'm the project director of the National Library Makerspaces Forum. The project co-director is Dr. Rebecca Teasdale, assistant professor, educational psychology, University of Illinois, Chicago. Emily Budd, instruction and engagement coordinator, the Champaign-Urbana Community Fab Lab, serves as the project coordinator of this project. Our team represents different maker groups, including ALA Maker Technology Interest Group, Library Makers, and the Nation of Makers Libraries Working Group. And team members include Lynn Ney, Sarah Nagel, Dr. Lisa Regalia, and Kara Coase. So they will serve as moderators for today's showcase. And special shout out to the tech support team today who have spent countless hours ensuring everything runs smoothly for this showcase. So once again, Emily Budd, Michael Dalton, Duncan Baird, and Richard Coulter, all from the Champaign-Urbana Community Fab Lab. So thank you so much. So regarding technology, in addition to this live Zoom space, the showcase is also being broadcasted on YouTube. However, all Q&As and comments will be taking place in Zoom only. Sessions are being recorded and will be posted on the project website later. Let's take a look at today's agenda. So you can also find the full details on the project website, and it's going to be a great day. So please feel free to participate in all or part of today's event. So our schedule includes a 3 opening keynote session and 20 lightning talk 20 lightning talk sessions and a closing session with 20 to 30-minute breaks between sessions. So we are hosting 2 concurrent lightning talk sessions, so you may choose which one to attend. I highly encourage you to participate in the closing session as we'll be sharing key takeaways from throughout the day. And we aim to collectively reflect on the strengths and gaps in the current research base, practical tips, and future opportunities in this area. To do that, your participation is key. Now I'll hand the mic over to Sarah Nagel, Creation and Innovation Services Librarian at Miami University Libraries and the chair of the ALA Core Maker Technology Interest Group, who will be moderating the keynote session.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I am honored to welcome our 3 amazing keynote speakers and give you a little bit of information about them. I will also be kind of monitoring chat during this session. So if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to stick them in chat. And at the end of the session, we will have time for us to go over your questions, and I'll make sure that they are addressed afterwards. So let's go ahead and introduce our amazing keynote speakers. So our first speaker will be Kyungwon Koh, who you just met. Kyungwon is an associate professor and the director of the Champaign-Urbana Community Fab Lab in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Her expertise includes the maker movement in libraries, library and information services for youth, and information literacy and behavior. Dr. Koh has received multiple research grants and awards, including 5 IMLS grants, specifically focused on library makerspace research across various contexts, such as public libraries, school libraries, and museums. Her work has been published in leading information science and LIS journals, as well as in op-eds. She teaches a Makerspace and Design Thinking course for current and pre-service librarians in Illinois' iSchool. Our next keynote will be Dr. Maggie Melo. Dr. Maggie Melo is an associate professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's School of Information and Library Science and the director of the Equity in the Making Lab. Her research explores makerspace design, culture, and user experience with a focus on how first-time visitors navigate these spaces. She's a recipient of the NSF Career Award. She's also the co-author and editor of Remaking the Library Makerspace, which came out in 2020 and is one of my favorite books personally on library makerspaces. Outside of her research and teaching, she enjoys punch needling and is striving to grow a giant pumpkin. Awesome. And then our final keynote speaker will be Dr. Rebecca Teasdale. And Dr. Teasdale is an assistant professor of educational psychology at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Her research focuses on adult engagement with making and maker spaces in public libraries and evaluation of public library maker spaces. She develops methods and tools to understand community members' values and about library offerings and use those values as the basis for designing, implementing, and evaluating programs and services. She also provides evaluation training and coaching for public library staff. Dr. Teasdale's research and training activities have been supported by IMLS through the National Leadership Grants for Libraries and the Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Programs. Her work is grounded in more than 15 years of experience as a public librarian and public library administrator. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get moving with our keynotes. So I'll be turning off my video and audio, and Kyungwon will be sharing her slides, and let's move right along.
Thank you, Sarah, for the kind introduction. Again, this is Dr. Kyungwon Koh. Today, I'd like to talk about the impact and value of public library makerspaces. Making has long been a part of librarianship, as illustrated in this brief overview. So from the Rwanda Ladies Social Society in 1873, where members gathered to quilt, knit, socialize, and discuss books, to the Ohio Tool Library in 1976, and the Children's Craft Room in 1979, libraries have historically supported hands-on creativity. Although this is by no means an exhaustive history, these examples highlight that libraries have always been spaces for making and learning. Fast forward to the 21st century, and in 2011, the Fairfield Free Library in New York launched the first public library makerspaces in the United States. Since then, over the past 15 years, library makerspaces have expanded rapidly. Initially seen as an emerging trend, makerspaces have now become a staple in libraries. Today, makerspaces are often integrated into regular library services rather than treated as optional add-ons. While there is no single national database of library makerspaces or a comprehensive census, surveys highlight this shift. A 2017 survey reports that nearly 90%, over 9,000 public libraries in the United States, offered maker programming. Another survey conducted in 2023 reported that 40% of public libraries had maker products and equipment. Library maker spaces have become commonplace, but there doesn't seem to be a single definition of what constitutes a library makerspace. Although the term suggests a physical space, makerspaces take many forms. They can be dedicated spaces, multi-use areas, mobile trailers, carts, or maker kits, maker events, including community outreach programs, or even online maker resources. There are also differing perspectives on what qualifies as a library makerspace. For example, does digital media production count as making, or must it involve hands-on work with physical materials? Another consideration is the distinction between low-tech and high-tech approaches. A children's craft program fosters creativity but may not incorporate advanced technology. A machine shop offers cutting-edge tools but may not embrace a maker mindset if it lacks open, community-driven explorations. I believe the core of a library makerspace lies in the mindsets and values it fosters, rather than just the physical space, technology, or final products. Therefore, I propose the following definitions: a library movement that fosters community by bringing diverse people together through hands-on creative activities and the promotion of maker mindsets, incorporating a range of technologies and tools. Some people ask why today's libraries offer maker spaces or programs, or how the maker movement is relevant to librarianship. So as a library researcher and educator, I believe understanding library maker spaces is important, not only for those directly involved, but for the entire field of librarianship. So this is because maker spaces reflect the evolving role of libraries, showing how they adapt to meet the needs of a rapidly changing society. So while some people still associate libraries primarily with books, today's libraries offer a wide range of services, including social services, wellness and recreational programs, and business support. These non-traditional services are often questioned and need justification, but they highlight that libraries are dynamic, community-centered spaces responding to contemporary needs. This brings me to the core of my research, which I'll present this morning: understanding the value and impact of library makerspaces and how they contribute to libraries' broader missions. There are numerous research findings on the benefits of making at the individual level, especially regarding individual learning outcomes. However, research demonstrating its value and impact at the organizational and community level is rare. Therefore, the research team conducted focus group interviews at 3 different library sites to understand people's perceived values and impact of makerspaces at various levels. These are the 3 public libraries partnering in this research located in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. All 3 libraries have dedicated maker spaces and popular maker programs. Let me highlight some of the key findings, focusing especially on their values to the organization and the community. First, our data suggests that library maker spaces strongly support the library's mission and the core values of librarianship. We analyzed our data according to the 5 ALA core values of librarianship, including access, equity, public good, intellectual freedom and privacy, and sustainability. Access was one of the most prominent findings in this research. At the heart of the public library's mission is access to information. Traditionally, this meant books, newspapers, and magazines, that is, text or printed-based resources. Today, information is shared, stored, and experienced in various formats, including digital, 3-dimensional, and hands-on forms. Library makerspaces provide people with access to a range of resources in different forms, technology, programs, and experts and peers. Historically, libraries have responded to changing needs, providing books when they were scarce and computers before they were household staples. Now, Makerspace broaden access to tools that individuals might not otherwise be able to afford. You may know that the early maker movement, which emerged from independent organizations, has been criticized for its predominantly white, male-dominated culture. The majority of makers were men and boys, and the range of making activities was somewhat narrow, focusing primarily on electronics or robotics. As makerspaces expanded into nonprofit and community organizations such as libraries, the maker landscape has broadened. In inclusive library makerspaces, we emphasize maker projects that reflect the diversity of community needs and resources, going beyond the mainstream STEM topics, and embrace low-tech and art-based making. Library makerspaces have engaged the people who may not have previously identified as makers, including children, women, and families from diverse cultural backgrounds. In our interviews, when we asked non-users why they don't use library makerspaces, quite a few adult users said they assumed makerspaces were for kids. I found this strikingly different from the initial criticism of the maker movement. American Library Association defines that public good is working to improve society and protect the rights to education, literacy, and intellectual freedom. Libraries are an essential public good and are fundamental institutions in democratic societies. Library workers provide the highest service levels to create informed, connected, educated, and empowered communities. Among the many roles that library makerspaces serve as a public good, learning stands out. This is unsurprising as the maker education is rooted in the idea that people learn by making and makerspaces are designed as learning environment. Uh, Community members who appreciate their library makerspaces mentioned that it's important for people to have those creative outlets, especially since the arts are one of the things that are frequently cut in schools when there's budget concerns. So as highlighted in this quote, the learning opportunities provided by library makerspaces often address critical gaps left by formal schools and other public or community institutions. The study found that there was a noticeable shift in people's perceptions of libraries because of the presence of the makerspace. For many community members who associate libraries with just books, the makerspace was a surprising addition to the traditional offerings of reading and information services. A participant said, "It's opened up a whole new avenue of things to do. When I was younger, you came here for a book and research for school, and that was it. I feel like it becomes so much more a gathering space, a place to learn new things beyond just reading and book clubs." These comments are from a community members who come to the library but does not necessarily use a library makerspace. So just by being exposed to the makerspace, this person's perception of the library has considerably changed. Library makerspaces have led community members, both users and non-users, to rethink, reimagine, reconceptualize the role and significance of their library in today's world. The presence of a makerspace within a library not only altered people's perceptions, but also enhanced the community's pride in their local libraries. The community members said its library makerspace is a source of pride for their community. Some said that they would move closer to a library that has such a great makerspace. Next, our research suggests that community members use the library more frequently because of the makerspace. Makerspaces have also attracted new audiences to library services. One teen said they visit the library more often because of the makerspace. Without it, the library would lose many teen visitors who come for the creative activities. Moreover, a user mentioned that coming to take a maker class at the library often leads to browsing and borrowing books. Finally, my favorite finding comes last: preserving and sharing a community's intangible and cultural heritage through library makerspaces. We found that library makerspaces provide a tool and support for converting and preserving old media and offer training and workshops for passing on skill expertise in the community. A community member mentioned that the skills that are being lost within the community, saying, "If you go to any of the shoe repair places in this area, it's these guys that are 102 years old. Well, who's learning how to fix the shoes when these guys are not here anymore?" I think all of that kind of knowledge can be shared through the libraries, especially with the young people, and trying to give young people exposure to these skills and careers. A community member said their libraries offered various classes, bringing in people from the community and beyond. One class featured a woodworking expert who taught how to make stools and explained the tools used. There was also a class on Indian jewelry by a skilled woman, and they learned needle felting. It wasn't just library staff, professionals and experts were invited to teach the classes, offering amazing learning opportunities that were hard to find elsewhere. So a program like Makers in Residence is a great initiative where libraries can engage local makers to create projects rooted in their community's cultural assets, host workshops, and more. All these excellent achievements are not without challenges. During the interviews, especially staff interviews, participants discussed the challenges they have been facing, including staff time and funding constraints, hiring qualified maker professionals, and providing current staff training, increasing the visibility and promotion of the makerspace, the need to be flexible and adaptable, and meeting the needs of various populations in their community. I'd like to conclude this talk by presenting a couple of implications and suggestions. First, among the 5 ALA core values, sustainability was the only one not reflected in our data. Intellectual freedom was present, but not predominantly or directly. These findings may indicate gaps in current research and practice in library makerspaces, and I particularly urge more active discussion and research on sustainability in library makerspaces. One of the common challenges that makerspaces face was step hiring and training. So both robust training on makerspace in formal education and informal networks such as community of practice are needed to address the needs of makerspace staff development. More research is needed to examine the role and impact of makerspaces in this society. In today's world, where stress and anxiety are widespread, makerspaces can serve as valuable third spaces that promote mental health and well-being. Numerous studies indicate that hands-on creative activities reduce stress, improve mood, and foster a sense of accomplishment. In this highly polarized time, we struggle to cultivate constructive conversations and mutual understanding across ideological lines. I think creating spaces where individuals with diverse backgrounds and perspectives converge around a shared passion of making may be the essential step in navigating and mending our polarized world. So library maker spaces had come a long way since their inception. They are no longer on experimental services, but a core function of modern libraries, shaping how libraries engage with learning, technology, and community building. So library maker spaces reinforce, expand, and reconceptualize the foundational value of librarianship, helping libraries stay relevant and connected to their communities. Thank you very much for watching. Apologies for the technical difficulties earlier, but I'm looking forward to having a great day with you today. Thank you.
All right. Well, Kyungwon, thank you so much for that. I'm excited because there's a bunch of overlap that I'm going to talk about from your research onto this one. So good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Maggie Melo, and I'm an associate professor at the School of Information and Library Science, and I'm also the director for the Equity in the Making Lab. So I've been researching makerspaces for close to a decade now. And within that time frame, I've spent some considerable time facilitating a multi-year project that focuses on newcomers, specifically on first-time users and how they experience a makerspace for the first time. So today I'm going to talk about the research program, some of the findings and implications. And at the very end, I want to extend the conversation around the newcomer to also talk about new Makerspace staff members as well. All right. So in terms of the impetus for this research program, like many of us here who have worked in a makerspace, you notice something rather ordinary happening at the threshold of a makerspace. You see students or users walk up to the threshold and then in a matter of moments decide, I'm not walking in there. In that case, when I was working in Makerspace, I began to wonder, what is it about the space? And I found myself walking out into the lobby saying, hi, can I answer your questions? I work here. And a common refrain was, the space looks cool, but I don't think it's for me. Now, switching over to thinking about it as a researcher, I began to see the Makerspace threshold as this rich site of inquiry, right? A user walks up and in a matter of moments decides, I'm not going in there. So there's a lot of information collection happening, but not only that, as the research is showing, there's a lot of feeling also, kind of a risk assessment as to whether or not they want to walk in or not. And so this led to this research question that guides the program I'm going to talk about. Why do first-time users turn away at the threshold of a makerspace? And also importantly, some follow-up questions. How can we, as educators, researchers, and librarians, minimize the friction and also lower the resistance so folks feel encouraged, and I really mean the courage part of encouraged, to walk into the space? So to set the tone, I want to amplify the words of a first-time user, Yusuri. So Yusuri was a study participant, and I was able to capture in real time how she felt about a typical makerspace. And this is what she said. I just can't see myself just walking into the space and picking up a tool and just using it without asking someone, who owns it? Who paid for it? What happens if I break it? I'm sure we've heard this a lot. I don't want to be on the hook for that. Yeah, I just don't feel the entitlement of I could just walk in and it's mine to use. I would be afraid of walking in and then getting to the check-in station and it says, you didn't make an appointment, so you can't be here. There is nothing more awkward than walking into a space, everyone sees you, and then immediately having to back out. So hearing Yusuri say this, at first I was very surprised. I'm like, you got all that by just standing at the threshold? There's a lot going on here, from uncertainty, imposter syndrome. But what I soon began to realize after talking to first-time users was that this was a common sentiment and also common thoughts going through the minds around all of these questions about the space. And so fast forward to where we are now. The findings from the study can be distilled into this key argument. And that is the spatial design of a typical makerspace, and I'll define that in a moment, communicates a narrative to first-time users. So they step at the threshold, they're presented with a story. Unfortunately, the story that they're receiving is one of disconnection and unwelcome. And so I want to unpack how we arrived to this key argument by briefly touching on some of the phases of the research program, beginning with, of course, phase 1. What defines a makerspace? What is a makerspace? So from the outset of the program, we wanted a baseline definition because there are 215 participants right now, and I bet everyone has a different definition of what a makerspace is. However, I also believe that if we enter a room, see a constellation of artifacts, equipment, supplies, we're able to point to it and say this is a makerspace because it achieves its legibility that way. So in 2021, I had the opportunity to interview and chat with Makerspace leadership across the UNC system. And some of y'all are on the Zoom now, so hello and shout out to you. This is your work. Thank you for being here. And so I asked them, what is a makerspace? Simple question that wasn't easy to answer. And their information, the data, then gave me a 360 depiction of what a typical one looks like. From what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what it tastes like. Because what that 360 conceptualization did for us is that it allowed us to create a typical makerspace for us to observe first-time users' experience for the first time. So that's where I will begin. We got the baseline definition from Makerspace leadership. They said, yes, this looks like a makerspace. We worked with a local development organization to create this typical makerspace, but not a physical one in virtual reality. I don't have time to talk about the VR component, but I'd be happy to talk offline about its affordances and limitations when it comes to data collection in this regard. And so what we did was we recruited participants to walk through this VR environment. And in order to be a part of the study, they had to be a student, and they also, of course, as I mentioned, they need to be a first-time user. They haven't been to one before. So what did they do? Either through their desktop or through a VR headset like an HTC Vive, they walked up into the space, paused at the threshold, and engaged in think aloud reporting. So think aloud reporting is pretty much articulating stream of consciousness. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And it's pretty much like what Yusuri was talking about earlier, all of that, and we're capturing it. After that, we did a debrief to kind of just zoom in on some of the key parts where we found that they were rather quiet, maybe talkative, and also, which wasn't necessarily in scope for the project, but seeing folks in VR in the space was very interesting. And I wish I would have captured this more so, but the body language around feeling like they weren't intended to be in the space, which I'll talk about in a moment, really showed with how they moved around in the space as well. So this is what the space looked like. I invite you to venture into it yourself. This QR code will take you to the VR environment. It is compatible with mobile devices, desktops, and also if you have an HTC Vive or an Oculus, it works there as well. So feel free to take a look around this typical makerspace. Now, in terms of the findings, how did first-time users respond to this space? There were several findings, but the one I want to highlight is the one of trespasser. Many folks felt like they were just not the main character of the story, extending that metaphor a little bit. Many of them saw themselves as being a trespasser. And so let me highlight this more by using Leah's words. And she said, quote, "I think with students in particular, myself included, I think we're just worried that we're trespassing. I think it's a universal feeling. You don't want to feel like you're trespassing in a place." I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be here because yeah, this feels like trespassing. Yeah. It was disheartening to hear this, to say the least, because I know as someone that helped launch Makerspaces and also worked in some, there's a lot of thought and intention around making the space as welcoming as possible, but there continues to be this dissonance between what is being presented and also the stories that folks are arriving to the Makerspace with. If you want to learn more about this finding, among others, for the first data collection effort, I encourage you to check out the QR code that links you to that article. So, all right, trespassing, that's not exactly the vibe that I was going for in the Makerspace. We asked participants what would they include in a space to better signal to them that they were the intended audience. And this is what they said. They wanted to see more advocacy posters. In other words, they want to get a sense of the makerspace in relationship to what's going on campus, what students are interested in talking about. They also wanted to see more signage, BIPOC, student work, bright colors. They want to learn more about the staff and see more soft furniture. Okay, so as you can imagine, the data and findings from this data collection effort then in turn helped us think about what would a redesigned makerspace look like? And would first-time users, how would they respond to these design interventions? So of course, we redesigned the makerspace. In terms of the data collection effort, it remained the same. The only difference is that all participants, and there were 20 total, experienced both makerspaces. Now, to minimize before and after bias, we had 10 students visit the first makerspace first, and then the second one. And then the other half, they did it flipped. Because, yeah, folks are like, oh, is this a before and after? I'm like, they have been chosen randomly for you to visit. So we had 20. Like the first data collection effort, we reached saturation around 13 participants, but just wanted to add a few more for good measure to make sure there weren't any other themes or patterns that we wanted to expand on. This is what the makerspace looked like, the redesigned makerspace. Here's another QR code for you to look at. You will notice right away that there's something different. It looks different, but it also sounds different. One of the major observations was that for the first one, it felt eerie because there was no music. So participants noted that it'd be nice to have some music, ambient music, like lo-fi. So you'll hear that upon entering the redesigned makerspace. So during the debrief session, I asked participants straight out, which makerspace do you prefer? 19 out of the 20 preferred the redesigned makerspace. And here are some of the reasons why, the findings. The first one was interesting, the courage to do something unfamiliar. To be clear, there was intimidation and uncertainty in the typical makerspace. There was also in the redesigned makerspace, intimidation and also hesitation. But the difference with the redesign was that folks were able to see themselves in the space because of something that they were calling the small details. So what do I mean about the small details? Unfortunately, I have to skip over the perception of time. This finding defines a moment where a participant noticed the space and feeling a moment of ease, a sense of comfort or invitation. Or if I heard them say, oh, that's cool, I then would pause and say, okay, I can't exactly see what you're looking at. Can you tell me what you're looking at this moment that is making you feel like, oh, that's cool, or you feel comfortable? This is what they pointed to. In the redesigned makerspace, there was a whiteboard that said Hall of Failure with Post-its for students to talk about some of their fails in the makerspace. Okay. Over here, we had a student's work in progress. They were painting Grogu. And then over here, we had a staff wall where you saw the picture, you had a bio of the staff, and also what they could help with. So these small details made a huge impact in terms of how the room was run, right? So earlier talking about the space that a makerspace tells, these artifacts were able to provide enough encouragement for students to do two things. Hold in one hand the intimidation and hesitation to be in the space, and the other hand, the wherewithal and also the support to actually continue engaging with this space. So for example, there was a student who was looking at the 3D printer, and he was looking at it and he's like, you know what, I've never had time to learn how to 3D print. And also I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, complicated to learn. But as he was looking at like the Pokeballs, he was talking about his engagement with Pokemon Go, which by the way has a thriving community still to this day, and talked about, well, maybe it's something that I can learn. So as mentioned, the courage to do something unfamiliar. So all of these details continue to encourage folks, but I'd say one of the most important small details is something very easy to incorporate, and it's signage. I'm not one to say what folks should have in a makerspace. That is out of my scope, and I don't know your community. That would do a disservice to everyone involved in that project. But I will say this, signage. Signage is key, and it showed up time and time again with the first-time users. It's a way to signal to folks that I thought about you. I also thought about some of the reluctance you may have, and I have an answer for you. Like Yusuri mentioned earlier, all of those questions, she had like 6 questions in that small quote. I don't feel entitled to be here. Also, there is nothing more awkward than being in a space that you're not supposed to be in. So they pointed out the bulletin board, this decal here, which is hard to see, but it says, yes, you can adjust my height. And over here by the 3D printer, it says, yes, you could 3D print as well. And so for both spaces, it's clear that students are stressed out because it's unfamiliar. But in the redesign space, a student said this, oh, this sign is pretty cool, which by the way, who says that about signs? That's pretty amazing. Yes, you can use the supplies. I feel like they're kind of reading my mind because yeah, I feel like if I just stumbled upon this, I wouldn't know if I could just use stuff. So this is nice. Yeah. Signage. And so a common question that I tend to get when presenting on this research also is, okay, well, since you're not going to tell me exactly, what you recommend, how can we think about how to design the space? And usually I present this grid. Some of like the macro features to think about and the small details, but I think more importantly, talking to students, talking community members, and asking questions such as, what can I do here? Who uses the space? Will help you indicate which student work to show. Plans, what's the vibe? That would then show like, help indicate like what types of plans to include. So in other words, leading with questions versus just placing things, I think is more helpful in that way. Okay. So I want to extend the conversation as I begin to wrap up a little bit about the newcomer and extending it to new Makerspace staff. So explored how first-time users felt like intruders, uncertain, hesitant, and disconnected. But we also have seen how small yet intentional changes like clear signage can reshape the experience and story of a makerspace. But what about the people who are already part of the space or just beginning to be a part of it? Just as first-timers read the room, new Makerspace staff also interpret and contribute to the ongoing story as well. Their perspectives offer a unique insight into what narratives the Makerspace is telling and how those narratives continue to evolve. So what I'm going to share next isn't a set of findings, at least not yet, but instead they're insights from a pilot study where new Makerspace staff document stories that they see in this space. And so their perspectives are helping shape the next and final phase of this research program, which we are currently in the thick of right now. So with new Makerspace staff members, we ran 2 workshops last summer. And it was a way for them to kind of get to know each other, but also to provide some distance, but also engagement with the space. And so the conversations around the stories in the space help to reinforce how spatial design and social cues shape user experiences. And it was a way for them to gather images and actually point to things and say, this is what's important to me or what's capturing my attention. So I'm going to provide 2 short stories that came up from that and then close it out. A story of belonging. So this group walked around and took photos of these elements. I know it's hard to see, but once you see the slides, you'll be able to zoom in. Each student group was handed a blank paper template, as you can see here. Rooms for their title, their names, spaces to post the pictures, and also captions. They were also handed a Polaroid camera and tasked to take 5 photos that collectively tell a story, caption each photo, and then provide a 1 to 2 sentence synopsis. So let me read the synopsis right here. The second you walk into the makerspace, you get to see all different types of people, projects, and inspiration. So this was to them, during the debrief, a story of belonging. It reflects moments of ease, comfort, and accessibility. It's snapshots of the makerspace that naturally invites participation. So they highlight here a clear entryway, signage showed up again, and also tools that signal to them that they can be used. There's also this human element involved in this as well, that newcomers or new makerspace staff captured, where they're talking about what things work and also what things they might want to change. So going along with the ideas of the evolving narrative. The other stories being captured, a story of disconnection. Let me start off with this synopsis. In a world of unknowns, it can be hard to feel like you belong. What do you do when everyone knows more than you? Wow, powerful, and also echoes what Yusuri had mentioned earlier. So in these photos, there's moments of physical, social, or emotional barriers that prevents engagement. The interesting thing is, in both of these stories, there are pictures of the same thing, but the story being told is different. Even something as so many wires, like this one right here, has signaled to folks that this space isn't meant for you. So this story, just like the other one, is just as important because they highlight where and why users engage. And so to close, why does this matter? Because they reveal unintentional design discouragement. Often when we design spaces, not we, mostly me, I think about how it will function, but more so my research is retraining me to think, how does it make people feel? A well-equipped makerspace is only useful if people feel comfortable using it. And so the takeaway is this: belonging isn't accidental, it is design. And we could always reshape and revise the makerspace story. And so if you're interested in learning more about these findings and also how you could use it in your own work with your own makerspaces, I invite you to check out this QR code, which will take you to our open educational resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. That was amazing. Kyungwon's talk was amazing as well. And I'm excited about all the conversation in the chat. So thanks for everyone for such active engagement. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides, and somebody please let me know if you can't hear or see me. My name is Rebecca Teasdale, and I'm excited to be here today to share what our research group has been learning about key tensions in makerspace design, use, and evaluation. So this work focuses specifically on public libraries, and we know that one of the defining features of public libraries is our really unique mission and role to serve the entire community. And that shows up in public library makerspaces as well. So to quote Khan and colleagues, anyone could be making anything for any amount of time in a library makerspace. In fact, public libraries have focused specifically on extending opportunities and creating inclusive makerspaces with this goal of serving a really broad range of community members. And so just like other types of library makerspaces, this focus on equity and access is baked into the fabric. At the same time, public library makerspaces are exceptionally self-directed, right? So these spaces are not part of formal schooling, they're not part of workplaces. And so as we know, those especially folks that work in public libraries know, Makers use these spaces and leverage them in support of varying goals and values and desired ends. And so I feel like this is the superpower of public library makerspaces, this combo of incredible heterogeneity of the population served, self-directed participation, and an explicit aim and connection around equity and inclusion. But I would also argue that it gives rise to some of the greatest challenges in terms of the day-to-day reality of makerspace design and use and evaluation. So Shannon Crawford-Barniskis has this excellent paper that really documents one of these tensions in terms of the challenges in balancing serving makers who are pursuing deep, dedicated hobbies and those who are using the makerspace for more casual leisure activities. So these groups need different things, and libraries need to make informed decisions about how their spaces are set up to support them or not. This is something that I really saw firsthand. I spent about 15 years as a public librarian and library leader. You can see some of the spaces where I used to work. Now I'm an assistant professor in a college of education, and I conduct research to really get into this idea of how varying priorities and goals that public library users bring to the makerspaces and the challenges and tensions that that presents for staff and leaders. And what I'm going for here is to create some frameworks and tools that can help us understand these tensions and navigate them in libraries. And so today, I'm going to share some insights from research over the past 9 years now that I've been conducting, specifically focused on adults who use public library makerspaces. So our team has conducted research with 8 different public libraries in 4 states. These are libraries of different sizes, different types of communities. And we've been interviewing and conducting focus groups and doing observations, gathering data from 85 adult makers and 48 staff and leaders over the years. And I want to give a shout out to IMLS, who's funded this work, as well as the 2 universities that I've been affiliated with. So across these studies, we consistently find that adults deeply appreciate the makerspace in their public libraries. Yet the things that they appreciate about these spaces and services vary depending on their varying values. So we've heard a little bit about values in Kyungwon's talk earlier. I want to define how I'm using that term because it's a little slippery and it gets used in different ways. So here what we're talking about are personal values, values about what is desirable, what matters to people. And values reflect the different contexts, the different priorities, and the different interests that motivate community members to participate in a makerspace. I am going to be talking about 3 key tensions that have emerged in our research. Tensions between product and process related goals, tensions between learning as an aim and learning as a byproduct, and tensions between library values and community values. And so these reflect these differing values about what matters most in the context of adults' lives. And these tensions really present important challenges for library staff and leaders as they're making decisions about how to organize and run and evaluate their spaces. So first up is product and process. And so what I'm talking about here is a tension between adults who are using the makerspace to create specific products and those who are focused more on the process or the experience of making. And this is actually a continuum rather than being mutually exclusive, but I'm going to talk about the 2 extremes on the continuum in order to really illustrate and unpack this tension for all of us. So on one end of the continuum, library staff often describe a subgroup of adult makers who are laser focused on a specific thing that they need to make. So in our research, Daniel said, let's call them adults on a mission. They've got their task at hand. These are folks who are using the makerspace for a very specific purpose. They come in, they work on their project, they go home. Some of these are projects related to adults' work and careers. So for example, we see teachers who are making things to use in their classrooms, or people who are mass producing items that they sell. Harvey is a staff member who described one example of a parent and a child who came into the makerspace together. And the parent is like, I'm going to repair my apron for work because I'm a server and my apron is broken and I can't afford a new one. So here we have an example of an adult on a mission to fix their apron and get to work. Makers also talk about coming to the makerspace to produce specific things that would be expensive or cost prohibitive to purchase. So things like making invitations or etching glassware for a wedding, or creating thank you gifts for a nonprofit that doesn't have the money to buy gifts for volunteers or for donors. The photo on the slide is a t-shirt that a maker named Rhonda made for her family reunion. So she made 10 of them at the library rather than paying to have them printed. And so we can kind of imagine like the assembly line that she had going on to cut out all the vinyl and transfer it onto these 10 t-shirts, right? Makers also describe projects to support other people or to support community groups or causes that they care about. And Carrie shared a really amazing example. Carrie worked in the criminal court system, and she used the makerspace to create memory pins with photos of people who had been murdered. And she explained, I got that idea because my child's father, he was murdered 5 years ago. So when you go to trial, you're not able to actually wear a shirt with pictures of your loved one on them. It's against the law here. So for whoever is the matriarch of the family, I give them a pin. Each of these are examples of adults who are focused on using the makerspace to create a specific product, right? In contrast, some adults are more focused on the process or the experience of making. So Sydney visited a makerspace where we were studying. They visited often in order to work on crochet projects, but they shared, I realize I'm probably not coming to crochet. It's more about being inspired and wanting to create and wanting to see what other people are working on. So Sydney wasn't on a mission to get their crochet project done, but rather they were coming in to gain inspiration and to spark their own creativity. Adults also talked about visiting the makerspace in order to spend quality time with loved ones, to share a hobby, or just have fun together. So the product they were making was not the primary focus. It wasn't the main motivation. Instead, the makerspace provided this opportunity to nurture relationships that were important in their lives. And some makers visited in order to meet new people. So for example, DJ shared, I'm not from the state. I didn't go to school here. So it's difficult as an adult to make friends or peers in your hobbies. I was like, all right, I can do makerspace classes. Maybe I can find some people who are also like-minded nerds. Finally, some adults shared that they visited the makerspace as an opportunity to enhance their well-being, to relax, to de-stress. Mahika shared that at the makerspace, you're not called for laundry, you're not called for cooking, you're not called for any other thing other than what you're making. You silenced your phone and you sit in the makerspace and nobody's going to disturb you. You have these 2 hours to yourself. So I want to shine a light on some of the practical implications of this tension between product-focused making and making that is more about the process or the experience. So first, we can see that different groups of makers value and need different things in the space. Adults on a mission may appreciate being able to reserve the equipment they need. Maybe they will want one-to-one assistance with their specific projects or want to get in and get out quickly. They may be looking for a quiet environment where they can really focus on their work. On the other hand, adults who are coming in for inspiration or to meet new people may prefer drop-in hours where there's going to be a lot of other people there. They may be looking for group classes and opportunities to socialize and connect. So libraries are going to want to consider how their scheduling practices and the rules in the space and how the space is arranged can differentially support those adults on a mission or those makers that have more process-related aims. In addition, makers have told us in our research how great some library staff are at, quote, meeting people where they are, right? And this is a really important expectation for staff and a really difficult expectation given this incredible heterogeneity among the adults being served. So it's important for libraries to offer training and support and resources to help staff identify what it is that makers are seeking and then adjust their interactions accordingly. The next tension is between adults who have learning goals for their makerspace use and those for who learning is more of a byproduct rather than a focal point of their making. And this is really important because library makerspaces are often conceptualized and described as learning environments, right? Many adults do seek out learning opportunities in the public library makerspace and of course, in the library more broadly. So these folks enjoy learning how to make things. They enjoy learning how to use new technologies. It's an aim in and of itself. And so the second quote on the slide from Lavender explains, I enjoy learning a lot. I'm a senior citizen, and I think when you stop learning, you stop living. We also see a subset of adults, and this will be familiar to those of you who work in public libraries, who are specifically focused on learning about equipment as a way to try before you buy, right? So they are coming into the makerspace to develop their understanding of how a 3D printer works or how a Cricut machine works. They want to learn how to operate them and then which specific machine they want to buy for themselves. In addition, some adults are visiting the makerspace in order to facilitate learning for other people. So often we see this related to caregiving for children. They are there to support their child's learning and development, or sometimes they're using the makerspace as part of homeschooling, for example. So when we met Bob in our research, he gave us this great example of working in the makerspace with his child to help his children learn how to manipulate digital objects. He was not using the makerspace as a learning environment for himself. He was using it to facilitate learning for his children. So we have these adults who have learning goals. However, many other adults are not focused on learning as a goal per se when they visit the space. Instead, they're seeking to produce a specific item or pursue those process-focused aims, and learning is just a byproduct. So the photo on the screen is a MIDI launcher that was created by a maker named Ruben. MIDI launchers are tools that DJs and musicians use to control digital musical instruments. And so when Ruben described building his MIDI launcher, he said that he learned about circuitry and he learned about microcontrollers and coding, right? But it was clear that he wasn't learning those things to satisfy his curiosity or as a goal in and of itself. He was a musician and he wanted to create and customize his own MIDI launcher. And along the way, he learned about electronics. Now, this is actually consistent with what we know about learning in adulthood more broadly. So in childhood and adolescence, learning is a primary activity. It's a primary focus. But in adulthood, learning often arises from the context of our lives as community members, as partners, as parents, as employees. And we see a similar situation when we think about public library computer labs, right? So we have some people who are using computers in order to develop their tech skills or in order to build digital literacy. We have others who are there to accomplish tasks. They are applying for a job, or they're emailing or sharing photos with loved ones, right? So what are the practical implications here of this tension between learning as an aim and learning as a byproduct? Well, first, we really want to consider how public library makerspaces are framed. When we talk about them as learning spaces, that is going to really resonate with some groups of adults. However, others are not going to see a learning space as relevant to their goals or priorities. And this can make it hard to reach adults who may benefit from the makerspace, but would resonate more with framing it as a production space or a social space based on their values. Second, among those adults who do have learning goals for their makerspace use, there is still a lot of heterogeneity. And so we want to think carefully about the different ways that we can support learning in the makerspace. Einerson and Hertzum have published really great research that documents different approaches that makerspace staff use to support learning. They do this through a framework around scaffolding learning, and they describe a wide variety of scaffoldings, things like peer-to-peer guidance, community-driven projects, competitions, as well as some of the more common tool-based classes or project-based classes. So we want to be sure that libraries are being intentional about the approaches that they're choosing, and that those approaches to supporting learning are well aligned with adults' learning goals. The final tension I want to explore today is between library values for the makerspace and community values. So when libraries are planning and evaluating their makerspace, they're often focusing on the library's goals for the space. But given this heterogeneity of makers and their values, it's unlikely that library goals are going to address all of that variability that we've been talking about within the makerspace. And so focusing only on library goals could overlook some benefits that adults seek and could realize in the space, and libraries could miss some key values and priorities. So just like in my presentation today and in Kyungwon's talk and Maggie's talk, we've been centering the voices of community members, right? And it's important to also center the voices and values of community members in our planning and in operating and evaluating our spaces. This is a key way to foster more inclusive and equitable spaces that really match the needs and interests that public libraries are aiming to address. So a couple final implications for practice. It is important to be intentional about gathering information about communities' values and priorities and goals, and then use what you learn to shape your makerspace. The Makers in the Library Toolkit offers some excellent resources to guide you with this, and I have the citation here in the talk. When we are evaluating the makerspace, it is important to ground that work in both library values and community values, rather than just considering library goals. And given the heterogeneity of makers, I really encourage libraries to consider segmenting makers to examine how the makerspace supports them in realizing the specific benefits that they are seeking, rather than using more of a one-size-fits-all approach to evaluation. So these are some of the references cited in the presentation. In case you want to learn more, you'll have these on the slides. And then I also welcome your questions and feedback either today during the showcase, or you can reach me afterward at the email on the slide. So thank you very much, and I will turn it back over to Sarah for Q&A.
Right. Well, if I can make my video work. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Just so much information and so much amazing insight from our three keynote presenters. Thank you so much. I have been looking through chat, and we had a very active chat throughout, but it was mostly just wonderful conversation. A lot of folks share. I think it'd be great if we could somehow, if it's okay, I don't know if this is okay, but if there's some way that we can capture this chat, because there's a lot of great insight, especially during Maggie's presentation. of ways that folks have tried to kind of lower the barrier of entry into their maker spaces and kind of like make folks more likely to come through that threshold and stay and come back another time. Lots of great ways that people have done that. So anyway, I do not see any questions at this time. However, this is now, I think we have only 7 minutes at this point, but I would love to hear your questions. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask your question over audio and video, or yeah. So potentially we could save the chat and share that somehow if folk, but I don't know if we'd have to get permission from folks to do that. Okay, so everyone can unmute themselves at this point. So, all right. If you would like to go ahead and put questions in chat or just raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself for any of our 3 keynote speakers. I'm going to give people a chance. Otherwise, I have a question. It might be a really loaded question that I have for Maggie.
Oh, sorry, I do have a question, but I can't seem to figure out how to raise my hand.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I work at a very small makerspace at a small local library that's just a city library. And our makerspace operates with 4 staff members, and none of us are dedicated to the space. We all have other roles in the library. And I was kind of curious to hear if there are any other spaces that operate this way, because lately I've been kind of thinking of like what the value would be of having a dedicated staff member who could, you know, focus only on that space and do some of these process and inclusivity operations. Like, I don't think we have this capacity. So I'm just kind of curious to hear people's thoughts on that.
Okay. Do any of our keynote speakers want to address that question? Looks like we're getting some hands up as well.
Sarah, I can just say that in our research, one of the things that we have been looking at are these different staffing models that people have and how that can support different priorities, different goals, and also balance the different resources that are available, right? It's one of the constraints really is like the resources that are available for each individual library. So I think I don't have any current research findings about that, but I definitely know that this is an important conversation that's happening, and hopefully today among the attendees there can be some connecting around those strategies and kind of how people are managing these issues.
Yeah, I know, especially in small libraries, there are a lot of people that do a lot of different, you do everything, right? In small public libraries, especially. Okay, so we do have some hands up. Let's see, Shannon.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sweet. My question is for Maggie, Melo. Hi, by the way, OSU Stillwater here. Good to see you again. I absolutely adore your virtual walkthrough of your Makerspace lab. 2 questions. 1, where is that physically located? Because that can't be a virtual space, that has to be real. And 2, do you have a version of the not corrected, the updated Makerspace where you made the design notes and choices and different augmentations to the facility? Because I'm loving it as is, but I really love your talk about making it more welcoming, making it make people feel like it's their space. Yeah.
Yeah, Shannon, it's nice to see you. And thank you. The magic of the Makerspace, the VR one, is that it actually does not exist. But that
What?
gives credit to all of the Makerspace leaders that I talked to across UNC who gave me their time and also depictions of what it was. So it doesn't exist. In terms of the redesigned Makerspace, I will put the link in the chat for you to take a look at. So you can look at it there. One thing I
Thank you.
forgot to mention at the end of the presentation was now that we've seen these findings in VR, the third and final phase includes having it in a physical makerspace to see if the findings are corroborated in real life. So yeah, thanks for your question.
Thanks, Maggie.
Okay, and then the next hand that I see up is John.
Yeah, hi everybody. I had a question for the University of Illinois Chicago. You were talking about community members, but I missed the very start of your talk, so maybe I didn't hear it. But where do you draw your community members from? Because I know you're right in the middle of the city. So are those downtown residents? Are those people from the near West Side neighborhoods? And then how do you do outreach to the community members?
Oh,
She's muted.
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Great question. So I am a researcher at the University of Illinois Chicago. And so the research I was sharing is drawn from 8 public libraries in 4 states in communities of varying sizes. And I don't run a makerspace myself. We were kind enough to be welcomed into public library makerspaces in all of these different communities.
That's what I missed at the beginning. You weren't even talking about UIC. Sorry about that. That's what I get for being
Thanks
tardy.
absolutely. Glad you're here.
Okay. And then Kyungwon would like to give some closing information. So unfortunately, that's all the questions we can take right now, but the grant team, I'm sure, would be able to take some questions at the closing session this afternoon. So, all right.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much for everyone for the question and comment. Yeah, as Sarah mentioned, in the closing session, we'll have a lot more opportunities to ask questions and comment because the closing session will be interactive session. So now we're gonna have 20-minute break, and you all can choose between lightning session A and B. So check your email because we have different Zoom link. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in different sessions and hopefully everyone at the closing sessions. Thank you so much.